Hi, I'm Trevor New, and I'm going to be walking you through the setup, programming, and different use cases for the Softstep 3 and also Softstep 2. There are some subtle differences between this and this one over here. You can kind of see, right away, different USB port. This is, what is that, USB-A? And on this one, we have USB-C, right? In order to power it on, you just take this cord and plug it in right there, and you'll see it show up. One of the pieces too is that if we do that again, if you watch this pad right here, you'll see the current version number. So that's going to be, what is that? Current version is like 2.04. I think that's correct. Yeah, so that's the first piece there. Plugging it in, of course. If you have a USB-C to A cable, that works just fine. USB-C to C on a Mac is totally fine as well. Yeah, if you have an adapter, it will work. If you haven't used either Softstep before, you'll probably want to start with the basic editor unless you're really familiar with how MIDI works. So let's jump over and go ahead and open the basic editor and see what happens when we start to set things up. Just a little bit about the Softstep. I actually use it in a lot of my performances, either with solo, with orchestra, in hybrid performances, and in educational situations, workshops, whether it's me using it to control various things on my computer or inside of Ableton, or it's also for can be controlling visuals. So we have the Softstep up here, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we have our 10th button here. I have mine set up so that I can use different banks, right? So this is my viola specific controlling bank. If I press this down, you can see that starts to fade up and down this particular delay, which is hugely useful if you're trying to control effects in that way. I find for a bowed instrument that it's extremely helpful. Yeah, go. And I'm just gonna plug my instrument in. But my viola here, one example of something that I might be able to do is come over here and I'll turn on a distortion effect. So I'm plucking just because there's not a lot of space here. I can turn on another effect and another. So these are simply switches. But what can be really amazing, I think, is to slowly blend effects in, like with this. So you can create this sort of fade out if you want to. Or you can blend a number of effects. There's really no limit to what you can map this to if you're inside of Ableton. That's also true if you are inside of like another software as well. I mean, you can, yeah, you can do it. You can do a lot with this. I might turn all three of these back on. Now, if I add that delay, and then I can come right out of it. So all of this can be done with my feet. I have this up here so that you can see it better. It's pretty magical. Why don't we jump in and talk about how to set this functionality up? So something to keep in mind when you're programming, you have to remember where like all of these different pieces on the Softstep. So, button 1 corresponds to the same thing inside of the basic editor. So I'm going to go ahead and leave Ableton open, just how it is. And let's go ahead and open the basic editor. So this is, you can go into your applications folder. I just like searching like a little bit faster. And right away we have an update, right? So what you want to do is make sure that you leave your Softstep plugged in exactly as it is, right? Come back over here, and when I click this button, it's going to update the Softstep. So let's watch that happen. We'll click here. Firmware is updating. You can see the Softstep starts to flash. And we'll come back here, updating firmware. Does like a bunch of, you know, flashing and everything like that. And then now it displays the version number and looks like it's done, right? So we'll hit done here. And now we have access to all of the pieces that are here, right? And we can use any of these banks. Like this is slot 1, this is slot 2, slot 3. And what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and load this into the Softstep. Now the way to do that is actually, I'm going to click save and send right here, and it's going to put all of these things into the Softstep, all of the banks that I just went over in this area that says slot 1, slot 2, all the way up to 10, right? And those numbers correspond to the number of buttons that are actually on the Softstep. So let's go ahead and click that. It's going to hit save and send, and see the Softstep is loading, and now it says note, which is actually the first bank right here, which is slot 1. So if you notice, if I go to slot 1 and then slot 2, the display name area changes, and you can see a number of other things change, right? So this is what you're looking for. These are banks or presets, right? If I do the same thing, but take a look at the Softstep, so you can actually go through these banks by pressing these arrows right here. You find when you hit those, you'll end up being able to cycle through them. So if we jump back to our programming, there are a number of parameters for each button, right? So in this case, we're looking at MIDI note, pressure, toggle, XY, Y increment, and program. So these are different types of messages, right? So in this case, this should actually be here to line up with the preset. So what I just did is I made a change right at that spot, actually selecting MIDI note, and then every time I do that, every time I make a change, I need to hit save and send in order for it to show up on the Softstep. And every time you do that, I'm going to go ahead and click this button. Every time you hit save and send, it's going to load, and then it's going to be ready, right? So that's really important. When you make your changes, you must hit save and send. It'll be saved on the computer, needs to be saved on the controller. All right, so this is the basic editor, and this allows you to basically use these presets. There's a number of them, and these are your note names. So if I have these numbers in here, those are the numbers that will then show up inside of Ableton. All right, so why don't I go into Ableton and I'll open up a new project. All right, brand new, we're good right there. And we'll also need to make sure whenever you add a MIDI controller to Ableton, this is true of a lot of other softwares, but you want to make sure that you go into the MIDI controls right here. And if you look down here, you should see the Softstep controller show up somewhere. So in this case, it's showing up here, and I am checking off track and remote. Track allows it to show up on tracks. Pretty self-explanatory. Allows it to show up on tracks. Remote allows it to control anything in the set. So if I don't have it on remote, I won't be able to click and map things or send messages that control the entire project, right? It'll only come in through here otherwise. That's track mapping. So let's see. So we have all ins. You can see the soft step is shown up there. If I go ahead, I'm on the soft step. I am on note, right? And if I hit a note, we should see each time I hit a note, it will, you can see it kind of bouncing right in here. We're getting a signal. Each time I tap here, you can see that green button or that green light. And we come back to here and I'm tapping that and we're good. I think maybe we can even look here. Yeah, there we go. So I'm tapping here and we're good. So yeah, I selected the note bank inside of the soft step here, right? So this would allow me to play notes with, say, an instrument. I'm just going to grab an operator and I'll drag that into this first MIDI channel and hit arm. And now when I go over here and hit, yep, there it goes. If I hit any button, we should start to hear some notes. And this one, and you can change, you know, whatever notes you want to have for each of these keys. But you can see that right now it's F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, D sharp, and so on. So all these are our notes and they're working and we have our connection. So we're able to send notes that way. So if you want to use the soft step to play notes in this fashion, and you can. This is pretty cool if you want to use it as, you know, kind of like an organ pedal. How you have like those big keyboards underneath the organ. If you're playing another instrument and you want to play some keys this way, you can map it to do that. You can map it to play chords. If you add the correct MIDI notes, really it's pretty wide open for whatever you want to do. And yeah, it's very responsive, as you can see. And yeah, it's very responsive, as you can see. So another option with this is taking what's here and maybe mapping CC messages instead, right? You could, let's jump over to pressure here. So let's jump over to the pressure preset. And what we'll see here is instead of just sending one single note, what you'll be able to do, so instead of sending just one single note, what you'll be able to do is based on how hard you press is how much that effect is put into action, how much it's mixed into the signal. So if we jump back here, we can check that out. Oops, went a little too far. So if we jump back here, we can try mapping some of these things. So what I've done is drop in a few so why don't we try that out by mapping some of the sends that we have here with the yeah, there we go. Mapping some of the sends that we have here and you know, maybe mapping that to 7 and let's say 8, right? And what you'll be able to do is then use that pressure to send that sound into your return tracks. So let's go over here. If you're familiar with Ableton, you have to hit this MIDI mapping button up in the corner here. And then we'll go ahead and open the MIDI mappings panel on the side just so that we can see this as it happens. And I will come over here and let's make reverb. That's going to be, what is that, 8 or button 8. And then for delay, that'll be, or sorry, reverb is button 7. Delay is button 8. And you can see that those were mapped right up here. That's all the info. And we'll get out of MIDI mapping mode. And let's just close that so that we have enough space. And now if we come back over here, if I press here, you can see that the harder I press, the higher this goes up. Right? Pretty good. And let's check this one for this one here, and it looks like that's going up pretty well too. Now, I happen to like the sensitivity of where this is at, but if I didn't, I could come back to the editor here, and why don't we take a broader view, and we look at the, let's see, we are in preset 2, right? So sensitivity is 1. So if I wanted to change that, I could go ahead and type in a higher number in this area. Oh, I could type in a higher number in this area here. And so, yeah, so if I bump it up to 2, that's going to be twice as sensitive. I'm pressing with my hand right now, and it's going up pretty high. And assuming that your foot presses harder than your hand, you're really not going to need that extra sensitivity in that case. So why don't we jump back to Ableton now? And so you can see if you have access to these sends just by, pressing and fading in, you might be able to, let's say I'll go ahead and hit play on this clip, and you can hear what happens when we blend these effects in. And let's, make sure that feedback is nice and high. That's good. Let's make this so that it's like super clear that we have, and we'll just go crazy with chorus. All right, now I'm going to start pressing these keys right here. So this is reverb. And why don't we make this signal louder? So little atmosphere there, right? Yeah, so not bad. So if you were playing, and let's say you wanted to kind of play into that, and I'll have the delay on already, and let's say I'm actually a good piano player. And you can kind of control these things in a way that just adds more nuance. That's the thing that I really enjoy with this controller. So let's try that with the reverb. And we'll just turn that up just for the heck of it. Yeah, so that's kind of a subtle thing, right? If we made it less subtle, like let's say within the operator, we wanted to map delay and LFO. So I'm going to switch this on. And if you just kind of look down in this area, I'm going to do some MIDI mappings where it's, we'll do a mount and we'll make that 8 right here. And you can see that just showed up in that spot. And let's go crazy with this. Let's do that. We'll what is that? That is, oh yeah, that's rate. Yeah, frequency. Yeah, I think we're cool. If I wanted to go like really crazy, I could do transpose, but we want it to, we make it sound like somewhat okay. So, all right. So I have my chord here. And if it's helpful, you know, if it's just Ableton itself, you can look at these, the LFO rate and these filters and kind of consider like, what do these different things do? Spread isn't going to be huge. Tone's pretty interesting. Time. Oh yeah. So that, yeah, that we start getting into different kinds of like envelopes and modulations with that. How about this? Just for one more, you know, little experiment here. We'll keep, you know what? We'll get rid of rate and we'll do resonance. And then I'm going to come back here. I'm going to keep the rate about the same. And now let's see what happens. All right. So that's an odd move there. Let's do frequency. And this can be like a pretty actionable thing. So that, and maybe if we just did it this way. You could essentially use it as a volume pedal. It's how it's functioning because I'm cutting all the frequencies out. So if I made this a little bit more reasonable, I could map 8 to volume. Let's keep that on a mount. And the heck, we'll do tone. All right. And let's bring the LFO back up. And let's try that again. So here's a minor chord. Oh, there we go. So that's pretty trippy. I think last thing, I'll do rate and let's keep the amount fixed, keep it kind of low. So it's something we can. Now, if I use 7 and 8 together, can I do that? Oh, right. Yeah. So right now, switching between adjacent, or using both buttons at the same time is not on. And I don't believe that is something that you can have in the basic editor. That is definitely something in the advanced editor. So let's just jump back into Ableton here. I don't know that that's a bad thing, to be honest with you, because like if you're just starting out, you want to hit, like, say you want to hit, you know, this one button right here, right? If you're just starting out, you might slightly tap these, but this way you're more focused in on this single button. The advantage maybe of being able to hit any button at any time is that you can get kind of crazy effects. So that's something that I do, but I would say that that's maybe less of the norm. There's not really a norm with these things. There's so many different options, but you know, just keep that in mind. So yeah, I think we have like a pretty interesting patch, and I would say too, like I'll just turn up the reverb on here and just use this key number 8, which has our, you know, all of these different things down here, shifting and changing. Sorry, all of these things down here, shifting and changing. Just kind of watch that and consider the sounds that you're hearing. Yeah, we're clipping a little bit. Let's bring the reverb down. So that's kind of fun. There's like so many things that you can do with pressure sensitivity. You know, this is just mapping one effect and a few parameters inside of a synth. If you can imagine mapping multiple effects, which there's a few that I've dropped in here, and you could see any of these things as an interesting possibility. What we're going to do next, though, is just go over some toggling. So toggling effects on and off, which is the other thing that I find to be extremely useful with this. So switching effects on and off with blending them in kind of gives you like a really cool base of operations, I guess, within, you know, whatever your channel strip you're working on. If you're playing, you know, directly you know, down into one of these audio channels in an acoustic instrument, or you're playing through here using like a MIDI keyboard or something like that. Yeah, switches and pressure sensitivity are kind of like I guess you say like the really, some of the really special things that you can do with this controller. So if I jump over to toggle, we'll look at how we can map these different effects down here. So this is what filter delay sounds like. Oh, let's make sure that our volume's back to normal. And let's bring those effects down. All right, there we go. Oh, it looks like they are bound together. So if I bring this up, it looks like they're working as a team. So let me just get rid of that. That has to do with it has to do with my MIDI mappings inside of my computer, because I like getting the feedback from the different notes. So, all right, now we're back to normal. And this is the sound without filter delay on. And here's with filter delay. Right. And here's echo. So yeah, let's go. So you can kind of make that corpus. And chorus and ensemble. And I added some of my own effects, or sorry, I added some of my own parameters for these. All right, so let's jump back over to the soft step here, and we have toggle. So we can map everything the same way, except the difference is because we're doing switches, we want to aim for these are the power buttons inside of Ableton. Whichever DAW you're using, you know, you can find the equivalent, whether that's bypass or not. But yeah, these are just on off here. So if I now go into MIDI mode, I'm going to click here. And if we watch our MIDI mappings, I'll click here one more time. And yeah, I guess we have 4 effects. Let's just do 7, 8, 9, and 0. So here is 7. We're going to come to echo. That's going to be 8. And moving on down the line, we have corpus. Click on that. That's going to be 9. And chorus 0 or 10. Right? And right now, the maximum and minimums, I think we're okay. But if for some reason you have like an issue with this, just turn the minimum down to 1 because it's at 0 when this is off, it's at 0 anyway. So if you go above 0, 1 or above is on, 0 is off. But yeah, let's see. I'll leave that like that. And chorus works. And if you notice, the light right here turns on when this is on. Right? And we'll move over here. So because we just mapped it right now, it's showing as on, but it's not on. So if we hit it again, it's off. Now it shows on, right? So it sends specifically on and off messages based on what you see here. Echo, and that's working. And corpus is off and on. There it goes. Yeah. Again, I'm using my hands, not my foot. Your foot, you will have no problem with this. All right, great. So I'll go ahead and play, playing on my keyboard here. And there's filter delay. And maybe we'll add some of the dry signal in. And we'll add echo in there too. All right, that's pretty active. You can hear it's like a little abrupt when I start and stop it. You could use pressure for these too. So corpus. I'm going to turn up the dry signal there. And then there's chorus and ensemble. Yeah, I really like that sound. And I'm going to turn on filter delay. Yeah, so I'm already starting to play with this a little bit. So that's mapping toggles, right? Super useful. If you're a toggle person, this is the preset for you. If you just want straight up switches, just go to the toggle preset and that's it. You're good to go. Once you map it, you won't even really have to change anything on the controller beyond that. And it would be very similar to having a pretty comprehensive guitar pedal system in that way. So awesome. There are really a lot of options. Y increment is when you kind of like a fader, you press your hand up this way, and it'll do one thing, and then you bring it back down, that'll do another thing. Acts like a fader. I really recommend checking out the manual. The manual will also give you some other options that you're not necessarily going to see with a computer, where you can also send CV messages, and that's going to be available if you look at the Softstep. You lift it up and you look here. Those things are actually labeled. A little bit closer. Yeah. So we have a MIDI out, and then also CV out, and then a plug for a pedal if you'd like to plug that in there as well. I don't know of a controller that interfaces with a computer and MIDI controllers and hardware quite this way. It's pretty amazing. And it's like a really interesting feat of engineering that this all kind of fits in this one package. So once you become familiar with it, you can really control just about anything, and you don't necessarily need a computer once you have your settings configured. But it is really good to become familiar with the editors. And I think in this case, if you're going to be doing something like that, the more advanced you are, the more you want to use the advanced editor, which is my preference, because for performance and all the playing that I do, I want something more specific. So that's great. If you don't need that, that is totally fine. You can create all sorts of levels of complexity in lots of other ways, and complexity doesn't necessarily mean good. So like, do things the way you want to do them. Don't feel pressure to to go from something that's working for you to something that's just more difficult and may not be working. So I think the only other thing we might want to look at is just the additional controls that we see on the right side of the Softstep basic editor right over here. You can see at the top, we're not doing any MIDI through, though we can actually send additional MIDI to any of these other locations that we have here. So again, this does have a TRS MIDI out, which is like pretty amazing, and control voltage out or CV out, just right at the top here. It's these additional switches, and then those additional ports, and there is a spot for a pedal too, which is right here. That's where that would show up. So you'd be able to map the pedal using that CC number. So it would be that CC number plus this channel number, I believe. And then in between there, this channel number corresponds to all of the buttons in this bank, right? So I'm drawing like a cloud or something there. And then this is if we want to turn off the backlighting. So right now, I think it's actually off, but let's save and send. So right now it's off still. Let's see if we hit send for on. It's loading. I believe I have this turned off in the advanced editor, so that might be a place to check that, but that will allow you to turn on and off the backlight. You just have to hit save and send. And then let's see, the other settings we're pretty familiar with. Yeah, the display name for the preset or bank that you're in, and then the current preset that you're editing inside of the basic editor. Those are really important pieces to to look for. If you start doing a bunch of editing and you don't check this area, then and then you hit save and send, you might have like a different preset. You can always revert back to the old one right there. So nothing to worry about there. When you're in the basic editor, just hit revert and you'll be fine. All right. So I think with that, we should probably jump over and take a look at the advanced editor. Great. So let's go ahead and open the Softstep advanced editor. So it's going to be here in my case. And let's see. So if you're opening the advanced editor, you may also have a firmware update. So this is what that looks like. So you'll go ahead and hit OK there. You'll see the Softstep. It is flashing on and off. It's getting, everything is loading, and yeah, don't interrupt the firmware update. You definitely do not want to unplug it while it's doing its thing. Successfully updated to 2.0.4, and we'll just hit done. And now we are here, and you can see the backlight is actually on, because I believe I have that on in the settings. Let's see here. So yeah, you just go ahead, if you're looking at the advanced editor, you click on settings. I'm going to do that, and we have scene changing on, which allows us to switch between different banks or presets. Sensor response average. Yeah, that's pretty general. Display mode 0 to 127. That's great. This is the piece that I was talking about before with, you know, whether or not you want to be hitting other keys that are next to each other. Right now I have all keys on. So that's, you know, if I wanted to switch to only hitting, you know, one key, I'd want to click on this spot here. And if I then do, what is that, send to Softstep. I believe this is actually immediate when you change this setting, but yeah, if I leave this like this, then I will not be hitting any other keys next to each other. So I'm going to leave all keys on, and yeah, there's your program change. And then here's the brightness. So if I dial this down, I believe that should get lower. Yeah, so in the advanced editor, it's real time within the settings when you put new settings in, and I'm going to go ahead and just leave that fully on. And then here's our sensitivity. I actually lower the sensitivity quite a bit, and I find that to be a little bit better in the advanced editor. Yeah, 0.69, but you can again pull this fader back and forth, and then of course there's reset sensitivity. You can do that as well. These are the settings that I use for my keys in the advanced editor. They do start out in a particular, I think they all start out with zeros. Is it 0 and yeah, I think that's right. It should be like 0 and 5 in this column. Don't quite remember. I just tried experimenting a little bit, and I got a few tips from the you know, the makers of the Softstep as well. Shot them an email. Feel free to do that too if you have any questions for me. You can send me an email if you have questions for them. But yeah, these are the settings that I use for the keys. I find that that works really well. Input. This again is similar with the basic editor. It gives you access to these other ports here if you want to send to the MIDI out or the CV, the control voltage. And it also looks like, this gives you access to things that are on your computer as well. That's true of the basic editor too, but these things are on my computer, and then these are the hardware that is down in this area, right? So just erase that so you can kind of see that. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's pretty wild that this comes in kind of like one package that you can use this way. Yeah, pretty amazing. So now that I have that all set up, these are all of my presets. So I'm going to go ahead, because you can see right now, this is on XY right now, which is still in the basic editor. So I want to load these presets back into the Softstep. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now you can see this display name right here is displaying down at the bottom here. So now that we're in the advanced editor, we can explore a few things that are unique to that in terms of control that you might not be able to do in the basic editor. So that is, yeah, there it is. So this is my own label. There we go. So this is my own label. I put that in there, VX V3. So that's like Vox Viola 3. It's kind of like a name that I name my stuff. I know that it's mine, but it's not just Trevor. And then this next one, this is an old name. Yeah. Log 1, log 2. You could just say, think of those as like loop 1 and loop 2 banks. What's actually happening over here is this is that custom preset, and inside of the first key there, this is what's happening. So whenever I press this button, all of these messages go out, and they go in this direction. So it goes from left to right, and you want to look at where it's going. So really important thing, once you get all your the type of information of the source, which is pressing foot on is pressing the button, then per that pressure, how much gain, and then the type, I have it as toggle. The scale is this next part, 0 to 127, which is again our MIDI messages. Smoothing is not going to be a big deal in this case because we're toggling between 0 and 127. Toggling means either you're sending 127 or 0 and you alternate. Smoothing is great if you are sending continuous data, which is going to be when you do pressure. So when you hit pressure, how quickly does it go up to that number? Does it take a little bit longer, right? And the other piece too is you can, in this case, since we're using toggle, you're not going to delay it, but you can actually make it so that when you hit the button, it takes a minute for it to start. Different use cases. I haven't found a use case for that, but I'm sure there are some. And then message type, control change, great for toggling, right? And then we want that to go on the control change number is 32 and the channel is 5. So these are, keep in mind for each of these buttons, that's like a few things to consider, right? It's important to come up with a process for this. So always go left to right, then hit send to Softstep, and then map your button, or make sure that, program it inside of your DAW or wherever it's going, and then test it. And that's the process. If you skip a step, make sure that you're sure it's in the right place, because sometimes you want, okay, I want this to start at, say, like, let's say you wanted this to start at 10 instead, right there. If we're just looking right here, say you wanted that to start at 10, you have to make sure that you send to Softstep. And at the end of this, you also want to make sure that you save it, because it's going to save it on the computer. So a simple way of doing it is making sure that you just do all those steps, starting from here, all the way to here, to here, and then to here. And then you come back around and you hit the button, which is going to be over here. And why don't I just get rid of some of that drawing? And, oh, that's me. And then you hit that, whatever that button is. In this case, maybe it's here. And then you're good to go, right? That's the process. I find that gives me exactly what I want. And once I've programmed it, I've actually kept some of the mappings that I made from almost 10 years ago. Some of them. I have a lot of new ones too. So actually with that, I'm going to leave that as it is, because I don't really want to change my mappings. So if you want to start with a completely new mapping, especially if you're new to the controller, you'd likely want to take a look at these presets up here. So program change, toggles, notes, pressure, 11 rack control. Let's familiar with that. Line 6, pod control, which, yeah, you can plug this actually directly into that and control it. Ableton Live control. When I look at these things, I try to consider what most of my setup is likely going to be and try to use a lot of the pre-mapped buttons. So I would say for my case, I would actually go with toggles and then probably add like a few pressure buttons. So let's go here, select toggles, and then you're going to hit save as. and you're going to create something new. So new set, or how about we say, what's like a good name here? We'll say it's for y'all. So yeah, say audience set, save as. So now that shows up as audience set inside of the presets list that's right here. And maybe it's helpful if I bring this in a little bit closer like this. So we have audience set, right? Great. All right, so we just saved that and we have audience set right there. And so now what we can do is we can start going through and adding the pieces that we want to be particular to what we're doing. Check, check. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is actually change the display name. So I'm going to go ahead and put odd, right? And if you're wondering, you can hit save in order for that to show up, and then send a soft step. And that's actually not going to show up on the soft step yet because it's not in the set list, but we'll just hit save. I like to do that whenever I make changes. It's not totally necessary. So why don't we just make a number of changes and then we'll hit save afterwards, like a normal person. So yeah, let's look here. So we have all toggles for these different, we'll jump back out here. We have all toggles for these different pieces here. Now, if you take a look at the output ports, I'm not currently using the TRS MIDI connection. So what I'm going to do, just so that there's not a bunch of extra stuff happening, is I'm going to turn that off. And what we can do, if you want to edit like a bunch of things at the same time, is you can open up a lot of these and keep track of which one is which by looking at what number we're on, right? So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and turn off all of the TRS connections, which is going to be the top one. So I just did that with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, or 10. So that's good. Turn off that one. So this happens to be something that I want to happen for all of them. Great. Because if you have this at another time, then maybe you don't want that going out of the TRS connection. So I'm going to hit save. So that's saved in the preset on the computer. The other thing too, just want to point this out. If you are using this with some other, with like other hardware, is that you have access to those TRS and control voltage, the MIDI and the control voltage, sorry, just the control voltage settings right here. And it's pretty wild that this is something that you can do. Like, again, with this controller, I was perfectly happy with the SoftStep 2 that did not have this feature, and they added something that is just really cool. So again, you have all of these different settings and you change them, and then you can attach it to your whatever rig you're using, MIDI hardware, and Also, we have our pitch bend, right? So if you're familiar with the wheel on the side of the keyboard, I believe the same messages can also be used for a like a wah pedal too. So that's just like really cool. They're so smart at making all these different things. So one of the really special things is that you can manipulate pretty much every piece of data as it moves from left to right. So I'll go to the audience set that we just created, and let's look at this piece right here. So we always want to go again from left to right in terms of how we look at this. So the first thing is we have it as foot on, and I'm actually going to change that. Let's make this, instead of foot on, let's make this a pressure sensitive pedal. You'll notice that up here it just popped up as save, and after we do that we'll also want to do send to Softstep, but let's put in a few keys here. I want to make this extra sensitive because I'm using my hands instead of my feet, so I'm going to multiply the gain by 3. So 3 times as sensitive. It's currently on toggle, but we need to, instead of, being pressure sensitive, so instead of that, let's change this to one of these other options above toggle. So these are different types of, I guess you could say, data flows or lines. If you're familiar with math, you've probably seen some of these words before. I generally do linear, sometimes exponential, which will create kind of a curve that's sloped. The harder you press, the more it actually puts out higher and higher pieces of data. So per pressure, the harder you press going this way, the more, the higher the numbers go faster, essentially. Yeah, there we go. Great. So I'm going to select linear just to keep it simple. And then this bit here where it says smooth, that is actually the speed of which it changes. So if I were to, put 50 in here, for example, if I press it really hard very suddenly, it will still kind of slope in. So we'll put that in there just as an example. It's already a control change message, but we have all of these other messages as well. Yeah, so if you were doing notes, you would do note live, but in this case we'll just keep it on control change, and here's your control change number and then the channel directly next to it, right? The last piece, I would say that if you're having a problem and your messages are not working the way you expect, often I find that people have selected something else here. So you can select these other options, or somehow it got selected and you didn't realize it. That's a very, that can happen. Not usually, but if you're using different presets and things and a preset happens to have something else, that can happen. People make mistakes, not a huge thing, but so we are on was that button 8. So I'm going to hit save and send to Softstep, and you'll see that it just updated. And the thing that we need to do before we can use it with the Softstep actually is go into your set list here. So I'm going to click on that, and now you can see that we have a few presets loaded in. So those correspond to what's over here, right? So you can see that some of these are down over here as we get to the bottom there as well. So in order to use these presets, you have to put them in these boxes. So what I'm going to do is go to where it says empty and number 4. I'm going to click, scroll down, and audience set is right there. So I just clicked on that, and let's exit that one. I'm going to hit save. I actually don't need to do that, but I do need to hit send to Softstep so that it will show up inside there. So now if I come over to the Softstep, and there's audience, AUD, right? Let's take a look inside of Ableton, and we can map the buttons that we have here. So we have odd, and just like we did before, we're going to go to MIDI mapping. And I think what I'm going to do is make this really expressive in terms of the different effects. So I'm going to map it to all of them and some of the parameters. All right, so let's just start with on for filter delay, since that's so intense. I don't think that I'm gonna, let me just click on that and hit map. Great. It's good. And we'll start with the minimum of 1, because this is control change messages. So they actually start, they go from 1 to 127, right? So in order for this to turn on, I want it to turn on right when it gets to 1 and not later. Like it was at 64. I don't want it to turn on halfway to blending all these other effects that I might, add, right? Great. So there's that. So I'm going to put that at 1. And then let's see, we have the filter sweep here, and we'll map that as well. Echo, we'll map that to on. Right, did I click on it? Let's see. And let's make that 1. So I just clicked and typed. This will be a pretty crazy effect. Let's map one of the delay percentages there. Corpus. We'll just make sure that's there. Dry wet as well. And just going through and mapping all of these things. So that's 1. And let's just do dry wet. All right, so that's all the mapping. So you can see I just did about the same thing, just going through and mapping each of these parameters. And I think they'll be pretty interesting. Great. So let's exit out of MIDI mapping mode, and right now everything's on. So I'm going to hit my button and let go, and everything should be off now. Now if I press on it, hearing a lot of corpus. Corpus is kind of taking over. I'm just going to take this one out of the equation, at least for now. Actually, you know what? We'll leave it on, but I'm going to make the dry wet just a little bit lower. Okay, so let's try that again. So here's our note. And I'm coming in a little lighter. So you can kind of see, probably more so, like how hard I press. You can see this shift happening here, and the delay offset shifting and changing there as well. Yeah, and if you noticed, so what I can do is do this, and if I feel like I like this preset, so I can do this if I feel like I like the effect where I have it. So let's say I did. Hold that there. I can actually jump over, and if, yeah, there we go. If I do that and come back, you can see that this is still on and that all the effects inside of Ableton are still on because it puts a hold on where you leave it when you then tap left or right and switch presets. So that's kind of a cool thing. I use that pretty much all the time. So you can see that it's still on, and I'm holding a chord now, and if I just tap this, it will turn everything back to the way it was. Right? Again, with my feet, that would have happened immediately. And then pretty cool. Lastly, I'll just show you like a real-time like wah pedal thing that you can do. And again, you can do this with any of the keys here. But if I had an auto filter, and let's go here, let's try this. And we'll make it so that this, turn this on and do frequency. I think we want to, let's put this around here. Let's see if, again, if you're turning devices on with CC or control change pressure, you want to put the minimum at 1 so that it's on between 1 and 127. So now if I press this, it's off here. And I think we'll turn up the resonance a little bit. And I have a feeling that the filter frequency needs to be a little higher. So let's bring that up. Okay. Let's go back to my... great. So you can see that I'm pressing and it's shifting. And there's not a huge change in the sound. So let's bring that up. And we just need to shift the parameters for the filter sweeping here. Let's try that again. And if we add chorus in there just for, and let's turn up the dry. And let's make it super aggressive by lowering this quite significantly. One more time. Yeah, so that's like a little bit much with the resonance. But what's really great is you can figure out your own thing here. And I think I'm going to invert the range, and let's see if that changes things a little bit. So there are a lot of ways you can use this controller. I'm going to do a little demo on how I use it with my set next. All right, so there's a little performance with the soft step. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So so I thought I'd give you a little performance using the soft step. You can kind of watch and see what I do with my feet, and also see what what happens with Ableton as well. You got the faders and some of the effects and things. So yeah, maybe this will give you some ideas.